Hi, this is Olivia Cheng talking to Critical Hit about season 2 of Warrior.
Nailed it. Cool. Bye.
Great.
But yes, you mentioned that you're in Canada, and actually, the first question we sort of put together was actually talking to that. I mean, I believe both your parents were migrants to Canada, and
Correct.
I was just wondering, we were wondering how that sort of informed or maybe helped you in the fact that the entire season of Warrior is about migrants to, America. So did you draw on any of that inspiration, if you want to call it that?
You know what? That is such a thoughtful question, and I've actually never been asked that before. So thank
Yes.
you. Yeah, no one's ever picked up on that before. I mean, I'm Canadian born. I'm the first generation born in Canada. Um, and I was in large part because my parents were working. It was really my grandparents who did a lot of the day-to-day caretaking of me. So I would go with them on the bus every day when they would run errands or buy groceries. And from a really young age, I remember, I didn't really understand it, but I remembered that feeling that I could feel from them when they had to interact with someone who, well, was white, because we came up in Edmonton at a time where it was like mainly a white European population, and I always clocked like the shifts in them, like how they would get a little more deferential, how they would just be a little more uncertain, and I think that was always something that stuck with me.
Okay.
Especially when there were times where I would witness things that I didn't understand as a child, but I knew that, my grandparents weren't being treated right, or they were being talked down to, or they were being talked to like they were children, because they're not stupid. They just don't understand the same language. Um, so a lot of, the protectiveness I feel for my family is definitely something that easily informs a character like Atoy, who sees all of Chinatown as her family, and I think has a recognition that she is probably one of the only members of the community who has the wealth and independence and ability to think beyond what it's going to take to survive the next minute, the next hour, the next day, and has the ability and bandwidth to think about what's going to happen for the community at large, for everyone to survive, let alone thrive.
Okay. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and that sort of nicely brings us to another question, sort of fleshing it out. Obviously, there are historical records. It's a real character. It's one of the few real characters that actually, was there to sort of base your, characters on, I suppose. And how much do you think that you sort of, not you obviously, but the writers and stuff, I mean, how much of that is a core real person that is, if that's there, and how much is, I'm not going to say embellished, but sort of is created, using logical leaps of, deduction and kind of and stuff like that.
I think it's 90%, 95% imagination and innovation and fictionalization, mainly because there's really not that much information about the real Atoy, and there's absolutely nothing I know of that exists from her mouth, her words, telling her own story. So if you look up Atoy, you see some history buffs writing about her, but it's almost like this myth and legend-like quality. Now, part of what I found, and I don't know if I Googled it, if I could find it again, but I remember reading something like she was arguably the first Asian woman to use the U.S. court system to protect her assets and protect her business. So that right there tells you what a baller this woman was. And that at a different time or place, she probably would have been the CEO, or the groundbreaking, female leader of some kind of industry, because she was that smart, to land in a country that's not your own, and in a system that speaks a language that is not your own, successfully lobby to use it,
Yeah.
and to use litigation on your own behalf. I mean, that says so much right there. So I think it was little nuggets like that that helped Jonathan Tropper, who was very fascinated by the real Atoy, you know, to create our version of her, who, yes, on one hand, she is a mob boss in her own right, you know, holding it down with, you know, all the crime syndicates in the in the family of Chinatown, and yet on the other hand, she's a disruptor with his altruistic streak.
Absolutely. I mean, I haven't started watching season 2 yet, unfortunately. I'm going to be binging it the entire weekend. My friend Coven actually has. I think he's on episode 6 or 7 or something like
7 now, yeah.
7 now. And he was just saying that you get a lot of progression. You actually get to grow the character from the first season, obviously, into the second season. So
Yeah.
So I was going to say actually that one of the things that happened in the second season, one of the main arcs, is actually perfectly what you mentioned now about this, the sort of, she walks a fine line of morality, of being this, you know, on the one hand she's avenging the injustices against the people, but on the other hand she runs a brothel where, you know, it's sort of the young girls there are still stuck in a brothel, and her eyes are open as to the possibilities that there's more that she can be doing as well. And it's that crisis of conscience that sort of gets put in the spotlight. And how difficult is it to get that balance right of playing both sides of the coin? Like you mentioned, she's a mob boss, but still altruistic on the other end as well.
I think, you know, you scene by scene, you play what's in front of you, because the heavy lifting is done by the writers. You know, the heavy lifting is done by them to build that journey that you were able to pick up on as an audience member, in terms of the conflict and the contradiction of her situation and her heart. So scene by scene, you know, my job is to embody the truth of how they're trying to build that journey, especially for a character like Atoy, who is so much, I think more than any character I've played, about mask, you know, and there was so much mask work for me to do this character, because, and I think I got so much better at it in season 2, just finding the stillness and trusting that the camera would find, you know, the meaning behind any little eye flicker, any little like change of, you know, glance or like tilt of the head, like, you know, because otherwise she just keeps her cards so close. But I think the writers really gave me a lot to play off of, even in transporting me to Nellie's Vineyard and putting me into a situation that is so outside of the norm of Chinatown, and in fact reconnects me to nature, and reconnects me probably to a part of my nature that has gone dormant in order to survive.
You mentioned earlier as well about the real Atoy, how people sort of built this myth around, and one of the, whether it's true or not, I'm not entirely sure, but the real Atoy was reportedly, you know, she went off and became a wealthy woman who retired peacefully in China, you know, well spent her golden years in serenity. Do you think this, that kind of peaceful, you know, golden age for the Atoy that you are playing, that she can get that peace eventually and serenity herself?
Well, I think anything's possible, and I would love for us to, you know, be uncanceled so that we can find out.
Basically, taking it back to the actual production of the show, like, how did you find working in Cape Town to film Warrior? I mean, Cape Town has got the history, the culture, this African culture that we have, the very political, and a lot of that, there's a lot of parallels between Warrior as well. And did you know much about it before moving here to shoot? And
No, actually, it's such a great question. And first of all, I have to say, like, just even hearing, like,
the accent,
hearing your voice, it just transports me back. I'm missing Cape Town so bad right now. I just want to be like, how's it, bro? You know, like
well
I loved Cape Town, and it was actually really eye-opening, because number one, we had such a hard time finding extras in Cape Town, because it's not big on there's not a large Asian population, and we were not all of us, but I was literally running up to any Asian I would see in the street, and they'd be like, oh yeah, 3 other people asked me already to be on your show, but I'm in school, like I can't do it, you know? And I felt like such a creep. I'm sure I creep people around Cape Town out, you know.
Sorry,
like,
everyone. Sorry.
Yeah, you know. And then I think we actually flew a lot of extras in from Johannesburg.
Okay.
But
Yeah, there's a massive population in Johannesburg. They've got a big
yeah,
Chinatown.
yeah, but I will say, like, it was so fascinating for me to be in Cape Town because it is one of the most racially complex places I've ever experienced.
Yes.
And the history, and the spirit, I think I could feel because of all that complexity, was just something that, you know, it was never lost on me that we were shooting a show about, I want to be careful about using this word because I know it's a term that has so much significance and history for South Africans. But it was not lost on me that we were shooting a show almost about the Asian apartheid of America.
Absolutely.
In a country that endured and overcame its own apartheid.
Yes.
And really became like such a beacon of what's possible to the rest of the world. And when we started to understand that, wait a minute, apartheid technically just ended 25 years ago. So that means you would have been born and lived through that time. Yeah. And we started asking our extras stories. And, you know, there was this one extra, I believe his name was Jeff, and he told his story to Jason Tobin and started to get, like, he started crying because he talked about how growing up Chinese in South Africa, he felt like he was the lowest of the low. Because, you know, on one hand, they were treated so badly by, you know, the colonizers, I believe that the Afrikaans, and then on the other hand, they were also so outnumbered, you know, by the Black and colored community, and how he also experienced, you know, the white government coming in and with no warning bulldozing his father's shop, not even giving his father time to run in and grab what he could, you know, and it represented their family's whole livelihood, and how his dad came home just crying because their whole life had just been wiped out. His entire means of supporting the family was just wiped out. And we started hearing stories like that from, you know, the Asians on our set, and we started to understand how meaningful it was for them to not only see that a story like ours was coming to life, but that they got to be a part of it.
I mean, I think it's, you struck a sort of chord there, absolutely, because one thing we have seen in the last couple of years is actually the sort of growth of Asian representation across a lot of media, from whether it be Hollywood through to, you know, HBO series, et cetera, et cetera. And I believe you're quite passionate about that as well, and that you have spoken very much about Asian representation. With season 2, obviously, with Warrior, we've had, you know, big movies like, you know, Crazy Rich Asians out there and stuff like that. Do you think we're going to see a lot more of this? Do you, I mean, and how do you feel about that? Do you feel it's becoming a bigger thing?
I hope so. I do. And, you know, if you'd asked me that question in 2018, I think I would have been so much more optimistic. And I feel a little more cynical about it now. I'm just being honest, you know, and I don't know how much of that. I think because the other day someone actually sent me a report that I could pull up and screen share with you guys right now. And it was a breakdown of, you know, representation for Asians, Latins, Blacks, LGBTQ, and other marginalized communities within like the top 100 grossing films in 2019, female directors, you know, behind the screen. And the statistics were abysmal.
Really?
Okay.
They were abysmal. So I think the perception, because you're seeing something and you have these fantastic, you know, publicity teams who are getting them out there, it is hopeful. Like, you know, do not get me wrong. I am so happy when I am starting to see all these like young Asian actors who are getting opportunities that, you know, that just weren't around for the first, you know, 10 years of my career. And it's a great sign to me that I'm like, I don't know that person. I've never seen that person, because that to me tells me that there is change happening. I think I'm just cautiously optimistic right now about giving that soundbite of, you know, you know, like completely. It's we're on our way, because you know, I'm not trying to be Debbie Downer. I'm just kind of like, let me save the praise for when it's really earned.
There's still a lot of work to be done.
Yeah.
There is, and not just, not, you know, like obviously I speak the most on behalf of the Asian community because, you know, that is my lived experience. But I'm very aware too of, you know, other marginalized communities and how they're feeling about their fight to be represented and have their stories told.
You mentioned Cape Town, and I have to do this because otherwise Kurt's going to shout at me. Obviously, I've lived in China before, and I love the food there. It's absolutely mind-blowing. And South Africa does have a few of its own delicatessen sort of things. And yeah, Kurt, I suppose you can actually ask this. Go ahead.
I actually got to interview Andrew Koji for season 1, and I asked him the same question. Have you had a Gatsby when you were in Cape Town?
Gatsby?
Yes. The look on your face tells me no. So it's
No,
the traditional.
It's a giant sandwich, is it?
That's the one. It's a traditional Cape Town like fast food. It's something you generally only find in Cape Town.
I would have loved to try Gatsby. The girls in the production office were talking about it. I'm like, that sounds amazing.
Damn it! I asked him as well. He said he was gonna. He never had it on season 1, and he said for season 2 he was gonna get everybody to try it. But I really want to know if he got to it.
He didn't make that happen.
You can have a word with him about that.
Yeah.
That sucks. We'll have to make a plan when you're in Cape Town again.
I would love that. Yes, I would love to come back to Cape Town for Warrior and other projects and have that Gatsby.
Well, you're welcome. Absolutely.
Yeah, we hope to see you back here then.
So good to talk to some boys from Cape Town. Please give some love.